There'll be about a 5-minute delay before the start of the meeting. We're waiting to hear from our board chair.
Good morning. It's 9:21 by the clock on the wall. Today is May 25th, 2025. We're located in the Government Center, St. Croix County, Hudson, Wisconsin. This is the time and place that have been published and announced for the regular May meeting of the St. Croix County Zoning Board of Adjustment. My name is Buck Malick. I'm the chair, and I hereby call this meeting to order. I'll ask the other board members and the staff to introduce themselves, turning on their mics as they do so.
Dave Peterson, citizen member, town of Kinnickinnick.
Joe Miller, citizen member, town of Hammond.
Greg Telejohn, District 14's county supervisor, representing Aaron Prairie, Warren, and a little bit of Warren and Richmond Township.
David Nickham, town of Baldwin, citizen member.
Ellen Denzer, community development director.
Mike Wozniak, land use administrator.
Peterson is taking our notes and doing other work as she can. I will make a statement for the record that I believe this meeting to have been properly noticed and published under the various laws that apply to us. If anybody has reason to think there is a defect in the publication, please state it at this time and we'll deal with it. Seeing none, we'll assume that it's all as I stated. We have minutes from the meeting of Wednesday, May 10th, 2023, which was when we held our April meeting. Board members, do you have any adjustments or edits for the minutes? No, then they will be deemed to be approved, just the way that they were published. The first of our public hearing, I would suggest one thing for the agenda. We have elections today. I would propose, board members, that we take those the very last items so that we can serve the public with the hearings and our decisions and so on before we get to that bit of internal business. Otherwise, I propose we proceed in the very order in which things were published. In that case, Mr. Wozniak will begin with the first item, please.
Very good. Pardon me, I'm just getting down to the staff report for the first item. Okay. We have on the Board of Adjustment agenda today 4 conditional use permit requests, the first of which is a request from Greg and Lori Powers involving property at 1795 85th Street in the town of Somerset. And this property is in an R2 district, and the request is for a conditional use permit to operate a major home occupation processing seasonal wild game. And I'll note that, as is customary, we've included a copy of the staff report that I'm running through and the conditional use permit application in the packet available to the Board of Adjustment as well as the public. Again, the property is at 1795 85th Street. It's a 3.19 acre parcel, and I just note it's not within a shoreland or floodplain overlay. Pardon. Get this sized right. The majority of the site's level, open to surrounding residential properties. The slopes are greater than 25% are located on the property, but towards the back of the lot and not where the construction would occur and where the business activity would occur. And I would note that the applicant has begun construction of a new home and accessory structure on the site, and also that our site visits have confirmed that both structures are located outside the steeper sloped area of the site. The applicant's proposing to use the accessory structure to operate the major home occupation, the processing of seasonal wild game. And I note that the home occupation, according to the Chapter 15 zoning requirements, must be incidental and secondary to the residential use of the property. And the residence has to be occupied prior to operation of the major home occupation. A major home occupation is allowed a maximum of 1,500 square feet, and the proposed structure is 1,224 square feet. The applicant plans to attach a 216 square foot freezer and a 210 square foot cooler to the structure on a poured foundation, and this would increase the square footage to 1,650 square feet. So in order to stay within the 1,500 square foot limit for a major home occupation in an accessory structure, the applicant plans to divide the cooler and have 150 square feet devoted towards personal use, bringing it back down to the 1,500 square foot limit for the use. I'd note also that the area identified as patio on the plan will be used for customer drop-off, and parking is expected to be minimal, as the applicant expects to have 1 or 2 customers present at any given time. I'd note that the operations are expected approximately September through January, and their hours are noted on here. I won't read through it, but if you have any questions, feel free to ask. I've got a slide here with a site plan. The house location, the accessory structure location where the business will be operated out of is noted on here, as well as a sanitary system. The nature of this use, there is a requirement for a separate holding tank for the wastewater generated from the wild game processing. Pardon me, this presentation is a little jumpy today. This is a close-up of the accessory building, and you can see to the left on the screen the cooler freezer area, as well as the building space in the center and the patio area on the right side of this image. The Town of Somerset Town Board met on May 3rd and recommended approval of this conditional use permit, and they noted they would like to see the driveway as wide as possible. Is the only really issue they raised in their recommendation. The Wisconsin, in terms of Wisconsin DNR, I would note that the applicant needs a non-domestic holding tank for processing deer carcasses, and the website reference here references that requirement, and the treatment system for the non-domestic waste must be separate from the residential treatment for the home and the accessory structure restroom. We've included our standard slide, which lays out criteria for considering, to be considered with your action on a CUP. And I call out specifically that your options today on this are to approve the request, deny the request, or table or postpone the decision to consider information gathered or request additional information. We've included in the staff report a number of findings of fact and conclusions of law, as is customary in our recommendations to the board. I won't reiterate the details of the application that I've already covered or that you've seen in the staff report or the application submittal. I would note, however, that staff feels that the approval criteria are met by this request, as noted in the findings under item number 8, and where we say the proposed use and structure will meet all setbacks and building size height requirements under Chapter 15, and the major home occupation is a conditionally permitted use, and as long as it meets ordinance standards, there shouldn't be any negative impacts on the surrounding neighborhood in respect to property values. Also, we would note that that the use, if constructed and operated according to proposed plans and conditions included in this staff recommendation, that the project should not constitute a nuisance, and the use would be contained within the structure along with proper disposal of the non-domestic waste. I'm not going to read through all of the staff recommended findings, but if you have any questions, I can be happy to answer them. I would note that staff has recommended that the board approve this conditional use permit subject to the conditions 1 through 13 in the staff report. And specifically, I'd reference the condition number 3 regarding the non-domestic wastewater holding tank requirement, which I've already referenced. I'd note also that if the applicant's going to do a sign, they would have to apply for a sign permit prior to construction of a sign or operation of the home occupation. And they have to comply with the off-street parking standards in section 15.430 of our zoning ordinance. At that, if the board has any questions for staff, either before or after hearing, we'd be happy to field them.
Board members, any questions for Mr. Wozniak?
Yeah, Mike, on that cooler, it looks like there's 3 separate doors for that cooler. Is that 3 separate standalone units, or is it 1 unit with 3 doors on it?
I believe that there's a cooler and a freezer unit, so there's at least 2, and I'm not sure, 3? 2. Yeah. 2 cooler, freezer, all 3 doors, 2. Yeah, the personal space has its own door.
Could you repeat that for the record, Mr. Wozniak?
Yes. See if I can be more clear. Yes, the space is segmented into 3 spaces with a freezer, and a personal space of 150 square feet that has a door, and then the rest of the, I don't know if that's the cooler or the freezer, has a door, and then the other unit has a door. If you need any further clarification, the applicant can probably explain it.
Yeah, the parts they don't use, they have a pickup or they control the smells? They have a rendering company or something, or pick up the,
Yeah, they have to comply with applicable rules on that, so it can't be, if you're thinking, will it be disposed on the property or left out, it cannot be.
okay.
Well, are you saying, Mr. Wozniak, that there's something in the DNR regulations that will give you assurance that there will not be noxious odors from the innards of the
Yes.
animals or rotting meat or stuff
Yeah.
like that?
Yes, I am.
Is that what you meant, Mr. Nickum? Satisfied? Okay. I wondered about the wording of staff recommendation, condition number 8, which says, should the work associated with the conditional use permit not be completed and inspected prior to the permit expiring, then this approval shall be revoked. Is that the same as saying then this permit shall be revoked automatically, as is our standard way of handling things, so we don't have to have a revocation hearing?
Yes, I mean, I think that maybe a distinction on this one is that the accessory building will be built, but the finishing of the space, adding of the cooler, freezer, for example, if that isn't complete, if that part isn't completed, the building could still be used as an accessory building.
Anything else, board members? At this point, we ask if there's anybody in the room who would like to speak in favor of this application. We'll call later for people who want to speak in opposition or people who don't want to particularly declare themselves, but just want to say something to the board about this application. Is there anybody who wants to speak in favor? Yes, sir. Please identify yourself. Use the microphone so we get a good record.
I'm Greg Powers. I'm the owner of the Powers Wild Game Processing. And then, I just want to say, I'm the owner-operator. I'll be living on the property also, so just any concerns about smell or carcasses, it's definitely dealt with right away. Of course, in the early season, I freeze everything and then I haul it away. I do have Waterman's hauls everything to the incinerator up in Elmina, Barron County incinerator. As needed, sometimes it's a couple times a week during the busy time, but I know that's probably the main concern of people. The freezer cooler unit, just to clarify, is 2 separate structures. The personal use one is one structure that has a dividing wall, so that's why there's 2 separate doors for the personal use, and then a freezer right next to it, but it's 2 separate structures, but 3 doors that are used. But I just didn't know if you guys had any other questions for me, but I just wanted to just clarify I'll be living on the property and it'll be kept up. Very nice.
Thank you. And you anticipate no conflict with your neighbors in connection with this?
Correct, yep. I've spoken with a couple of them that are right by me and personally have spoke with them and stuff, so besides the letter of the application.
Do you anticipate any difficulty getting up and running, finishing your house, moving in, all those things within a year from today?
I do not.
Excellent. I have no further questions. You board members? All right. Okay. Thank you. Just stand by if you will. Does anybody else want to speak in favor of this application? All right. Thank you. Does anybody want to speak in opposition to it? This would be your time for that, or I'm not seeing anybody jumping up. Anybody who wants simply to speak about it, but not necessarily for or against, but has some idea that they think might help the board to make a better decision? I'm not seeing anything. Board members, Ms. Denzer.
I had a question for Mr. Powers. Can you go back up?
Yes.
Do you anticipate not opening yet this year, or do you anticipate opening
I
this?
anticipate on opening this year, yes.
So you will be moved in and have your home built this summer?
So, yeah.
Completely?
So, yeah.
Okay.
So season usually starts, that mid-September, and we plan on,
Okay,
that's the goal.
okay. Well, as a major home occupation, you have to occupy the home before you can have the occupation.
Yes, yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Just wanted to know that.
Any other questions? Anybody wanting to make comments? Otherwise, I'm on the verge of closing the hearing, which means that from that point on, we won't take any new paper evidence or any testimony from anybody. I forgot to ask or to state that we want to have everybody sign our oath that what they say is the truth. And the paper for that is over on the credenza next to the wall on my right. Did you sign that, Mr. Powers, before you stepped up? Thank you very much. Thanks for figuring it out. Or maybe you made an announcement before I got here.
We waited for you.
Yeah, all right. At least it worked out. So that's good. Well, the clock shows 9:42. I'm declaring this hearing closed. Inasmuch as there was no opposition, this might be a fairly straightforward decision. Do you board members think that you're on the verge of a decision? All right, anybody want to make a motion?
I'll make a motion, we approve the application as presented.
I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Miller and Mr. Peterson. I would like it if the final wording could have those changes that I mentioned in number 8. I don't think this rises to the level of an amendment to your motion, but that it would then read, the last phrase would read, "Then this permit shall be revoked automatically." Mr. Wozniak indicated that's what the staff meant by their language, but I'd like it spelled out just a little more exactly because it could possibly be a big deal. Hopefully it won't. Passing that, is there any more discussion or debate? Any amendments, anything like that, board members, before we vote? In that case, all who are in favor of adopting the staff recommendation with that little bit of wording change should now vote aye.
Aye.
Aye. And all those opposed, nay. And the vote is unanimously in favor. Presumably, Mr. Powers will be able to give you a written copy signed later today. If not, an electronic version will be available from Mr. Wozniak or other members of the staff almost immediately. If you're ready, Mr. Wozniak, we could proceed with the next hearing.
Yes, Mr. Chair, we can move on to the next conditional use permit request. This is a request from Kevin Adkins and Sarah Sommerfeld, and the property in question is 161 Riverview Acres and in the town of St. Joseph, and this is a property in the Lower St. Croix Riverway Overlay District. And the request is for a conditional use permit to construct a lift according to the applicable section of the Riverway Overlay Ordinance. And again, you've had a copy of the staff report and the conditional use permit application provided to you with the packet. I just pull up a visual that indicates location of the property, again on the St. Croix River, a 2.6 acre parcel. And the property has an existing single family dwelling that's compliant with Riverway Overlay District regulations, and the lot and home meet all other requirements in the, again, in the Riverway Overlay District. And I would note that, as is typical with these lifts, some vegetation needs to be removed. It has to comply with the strict quarter width for removing or trimming vegetation in the alignment proposed on this site map. Again, in the packet, there are some visuals that, including some photos of what that portion of the site looks like, and a detailed topographic map that shows the grade change in the alignment, hence the necessity for a lift on this property. Also included are what we typically see with plans and schematics for proposed lift construction, including details of the car for the lift and some of the mechanical details of it. I'll note that the town of St. Joseph has not offered any comment on this, and the DNR, I believe we have gotten a follow-up indicating, as long as it's done consistent with the ordinance provisions, that they are, DNR's comfortable with staff recommendation on this one. The proposed, let me move on here. Somehow this presentations are just jumping around today on me. Again, your options for action on this include approving, denying, or tabling to consider additional information. Staff have included in the staff recommendation draft findings of fact and conclusions of law, and these largely document the nature of the request and further find that the proposal would be consistent with the criteria for conditional use permit action set forth in the Riverway Overlay District ordinance. And again, I'd call out specifically in these findings that the existing vegetation may be removed within 1 foot either side of the lift route and up to 8 feet above the lift floor. So those are the limitations that the construction of the lift must adhere to. And of course, only one lift may be permitted on the lot as well.
Excuse me,
Yes.
are they cutting down trees to do this?
There, the corridor, there are trees, but I can't tell you exactly if it's whole trees or just branches that would have to be trimmed for this. It would have to stay within that 8-foot limit on either side of the lift. And given the vegetation on the site, it's a view of staff that it will, within 5 years, it will be visually inconspicuous with as trees continue to grow and leaf out.
Excuse me, just to make sure the record is clear, the width limit for a lift is 8 feet in overall width. and not more than 1 foot on either side of the lift route. It's covered in point number 3 on page 49 of the packet. Please go ahead.
Thank you for the clarification. I'd further note, just call out in the findings, again, as we typically include in these actions on lifts, that all standards in the Riverway and Shoreland Overlay District shall be met. All landings shall be no more than 50 square feet. That's a standard called out in Shoreland, in the Shoreland Ordinance, section 16.3205. The pedestrian access provision in Shoreland. Staff has included a recommendation that the board approve this conditional use permit to construct a lift at 161 Riverview Acres Road, subject to the conditions referenced in the staff report here. And I'll note there are a total of 12 conditions, and specifically, I'd note the provision regarding number 3, regarding that with provision for vegetation removal, and that a revegetation plan shall be permitted to CDD staff prior to the on-site pre-construction meeting, which shall provide for vegetation that will effectively screen the lift within 5 years, and that this plan may include provisions for retaining existing trees if they will effectively meet the screening requirement. And again, as is customary, the applicant shall have 1 year from the date of approval of this conditional use permit to begin construction, and 2 years to complete the project and complete the final inspection with the department. And at that, most of the other conditions here are standard conditions associated with conditional use permits, or specifically conditional use permits in the Riverway Overlay District. Staff can field any questions the Board of Adjustment may have, either prior to hearing or after public hearing.
Board members? Again, if the work is not done and inspected before the year is up, is it the intention of the staff or the recommendation to us that the permit shall be revoked automatically? It's recommendation point number 7 on packet page 50.
Yeah, I think that's the intent, and I guess if that's our convention now, going forward, we'll make sure that the reference in the conditions reflects that.
I thought it was part of your template based on
Yeah,
some discussion earlier in the month at a previous meeting, but at the moment, just as the presentation is jumping around, maybe the text in your template is also.
Yeah, thank you.
Anything, members? Anybody else in the room want to speak in favor of this application at this point? Mr. Granberg, please step up to the mic and identify yourself.
Joe Granberg, land surveyor, working on the project, representative for Kevin Atkins. I'll start off with answering some of the tree questions, and I might kind of defer to Kevin a little bit here. When we were on the site mid-March, just after 14 feet of snow turned to mush on the ground, up and down that hill, and it's 190 feet vertical, I didn't see anything. There is a trail cut, but it's buckthorn. It's like hair on a dog. That's all cut, or not the whole hillside, but the path. You'll see that. If you make a site visit, you're going to see that. I don't remember ever seeing anything over the size of my wrist that was cut for this trail. So as far as trees being cut, Possibly, like Mike said, there may be some branches overhead, just to be able to get the cart down through, because at some points it's higher than ground level. But other than that, there's no major trees that have been cut or need to be cut. And this would be the point where Kevin may want to step in and clarify, because he's the one that actually cut.
Good morning, Kevin Atkins. You won't be able to see the trim. You can go ahead and come out and look. We planted 10 trees in front. There's no big trees to take down. You can't see it. So I think the county zoning should be happy with that. The landing at the top and bottom, I've reviewed the staff recommendations. I don't see any problems in line with what they want. Do you have any questions for me?
Joe, did you mention buckthorn by any chance?
Oh, a little bit, yeah.
Are we doing the appropriate invasive species process to eliminate them?
Well, yeah, it's a chemical that you cut and you put on it, and it hopefully kills the roots, but, you know.
It's buckthorn.
It's buckthorn, which is a noxious weed.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Thank you, Mr. Atkins, Mr. Granberg.
Two more things. Question, clarification. A couple of things that we've done a couple of these. GNS Land Solutions have done a couple of these in the past, the lifts. And there were two things on there. One was number 2, which maybe I can show here. Stay put. What are you doing? Number 2, all landings shall not exceed 50 square feet. Any landings built below the floodplain elevation shall be constructed per standards that will be floodproof. And that's not something I've seen before. We're not sure what floodproof means, if it has to do with materials. We're just looking for some guidance, and from, not something that needs to be done today, but we'd be looking for something from the zoning office.
Well, the standards of NR 118 have not changed, and neither has our ordinance. So chances are very good that however you last did it is still the standard. Maybe the language has come up a couple of times today, and our templates might have jumped around a little bit.
Okay.
But obviously, you're not going to have any mechanicals or electricals in a place where they'll get wet.
Okay. Well, and that brings me to the other one about the 1 year of use. I realize it's a conditional use permit thing and it's a language thing. Is that something that needs to be documented somehow, that it's being used at least once a year? And if so, can the zoning office offer guidance as far as how we document that?
Yeah, I think on the lifts, what I would say is it's probably more of an issue is it constructed? Because the idea that it, if someone gets a conditional use permit approved and then waits 5 years, say, conditions can change on the site. But in terms of use, I don't think we've been requiring our applicants or existing lifts to provide evidence that the lift has been used every year, if that's what you're asking.
Yeah.
Joe.
Well, and I think what Buck said, it's about the language and the templates. So I was just
Yeah. What happens sometimes is the older lifts fall into disrepair and stop being used because they're not safe to use and meeting state standards and whatnot.
Okay. That's all I have. Does anybody have any questions for me?
Doesn't look like it.
Okay.
Is there anybody else in the room who wants to speak in favor of this application at this time? This would be the time to do it. How about opposition? Anybody want to speak in opposition to this application? Or not necessarily for or against, but have something to say to guide us to a better decision? Looks like no indications to that effect, so it's 10:01 according to the clock on the wall, and I will declare this hearing closed. No more evidence. We'll deal with a decision based on the evidence we have before us already. And usually lifts are not a bone of contention. Let's see how this board feels about this application. Anybody ready for a decision?
I'd move that we approve the conditional use as presented.
I'll second it.
Thank you, gentlemen. We have a motion made and seconded to adopt the staff recommendation with a little bit of tweaking of the language as indicated earlier. Any further discussion or debate about this motion before we vote on it? None? Okay, all in favor vote aye.
Aye.
It's unanimously in favor. So again, Mr. Granberg will get it out as soon as the staff can prepare something and I can sign it.
Does that mean no site visit?
No site visit necessary.
Okay, thank you.
Is that a major disappointment?
Well, I was hoping you guys would go and see all the buckthorn.
And you were prepared to issue loppers and daubers for the herbicide?
It will only be a revegetation plan, because if they don't hurry up and get it built, they won't be able to find where they were supposed to put it in the first place. So, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the levity. Mr. Wozniak, the next one, please.
Yes, the next request on the agenda is another conditional use permit, and the request is from Somerset Storage LLC, and this is involving property at 500 County Road VV, again in the town of Somerset. I'll note that this property is zoned C3 commercial, and the request is for a conditional use permit to construct an indoor recreational facility that will be temporary batting cages and in a building that is basically constructed for storage use. This is envisioned to be a sort of temporary use over a 2 to 3 year period. The site map here indicates the parcel is a 6.3 acre parcel, and it is the area that isn't developed on the site is wooded, and there isn't any shoreland or floodplain overlay districts present on this site. I'll note that there are slopes greater than 25% on the property. Not the portion of the property being developed for this use. And the stormwater review of best management practices was conducted for the proposed structure as part of a land use permit review. The site is currently used as an indoor and outdoor self-storage facility and electrical contractor business operation. The applicant's, again, proposing temporary use of a portion of a new self-storage building as an indoor recreation facility for baseball batting cages. And the applicant is expanding the self-storage with an addition to the existing structure and an additional structure as shown in red on the next slide I'll advance to here in a moment. The new structure and the addition to the existing structure were approved last fall through a land use permit as referenced here in the slide to expand the self-storage operation facility. The batting cages will be located in the new structure, not the expansion of the existing. And I'll note that the batting cages will be located in 10 of the 18 20 by 40 storage units. And parking for the batting cages is proposed on the east side of the structure. And I'll note restrooms for the customers will be provided in the new structure, again, in one of the storage units. And I'll reiterate, the planned facility use is, for the batting cages, is 2 to 3 years. This is the site map I had referenced, and on this, in the sort of right here in the center of this slide, would be the new structure that the proposed batting cages would be developed within. And this is a floor plan view of that structure, and you can see what the configuration within the building for the batting cages would be. The town of Somerset has recommended approval of this request installed inside newly constructed commercial storage shed. And the county highway has not voiced any concerns regarding access egress issues from the county road. Again, you have the options of approving the request, denying the request, or tabling and postponing the decision if you feel more information is needed to further assess the impacts of the use. Staff have included a number of findings of fact and conclusions of law in draft form within the staff report. And some of this just details the nature of the request and specifics about the site, and also we have a review of how this use matches up with the conditional use permit criteria established in Chapter 15, Section 15.5506, our approval criteria for conditional use permits in the zoning ordinance. And generally, I would just say on this, the use of the indoor rec facility is allowed as a conditional use. Conformance, as long as it conforms with the prescriptive requirements spelled out in the ordinance, and any permit conditions the board chooses to include, this should not negatively impact, the view of staff is this should not negatively impact neighboring parcels. It is going to be conducted inside. And I would note the results of the proposed project. Again, staff believes would not constitute a nuisance in and of itself, and the structure is an approved use and is and the use is contained within the structure. Again, in terms of any impacts on public health, safety, or general welfare, again, I'd emphasize the use of the indoor rec facility should not negatively affect public health, safety, or general welfare of the community. Staff has included a recommendation for this request that the board approve the conditional use permit, subject to the conditions included here in the staff report. I believe we have 11 conditions for your consideration. And I'll note, I expect that we will revise that same language to indicate that if it's not completed within the time frame, that it would be revoked. And per discussion on the prior items. And other than that, the conditions would call for complying with applicable zoning standards and conformance with the plans and supporting information submitted with the application. At that, staff can field any questions the board may have either before or after public hearing.
In reference to it going for about 3 years, I guess I get a little nervous about having in my opinion, an open-ended. What happens after that 3 years?
Well, let me speak to this. Generally speaking, time limits are not put on conditional use permits. This is what the applicant is anticipating. It's my understanding the party that will be using the batting cages is intending to develop a facility of their own, and so this is an interim solution for them. If the board has a question about that, maybe you could ask that of the representative of the applicant.
Other questions, board members? In the findings of fact and conclusions on page 82 of the packet, the wording looks a little awkward to me under the nuisance language about noise, dust, smoke, odor, lighting, air, and water contaminants, etc. What we really mean when you said the structure is an approved use and is contained within the structure, I suppose was the structure is an approved use and the batting cage is contained within the structure. Is that your understanding?
Yeah, I think that's the case. I mean, part of this, some of the concerns, for example, stormwater, that has already been addressed because the structure itself was approved under a land use permit. And not the use, this use of the structure, but the structure itself.
So it's not the structure within the structure, it's the batting cage within the
Correct.
structure that
Correct.
we're talking about. And in your recommendation, it's number 6 where the language should be tightened up to show that the permit shall be revoked automatically if it's not implemented within that year. Number 6. Last point I have is the somewhere in the application I thought I saw on a sketch a potential location for a sign, or maybe I'm thinking there was no indication of a sign, but surely they would want a sign. Am I right in drawing the conclusion that this condition, the granting of this conditional use permit does not include approval of a sign? That is a different process. Is that correct?
It is, and it would be subject to sign provisions for the C3 district.
Okay, just to make sure everybody understands that we do have that handled in a different place. More questions from the board? No. Anybody in the room want to speak in favor of this application? Surely, this is your time.
Good morning, Ryan Carey, attorney for the applicant. I'm also joined by a member of applicant, Ben Peterson. Just wanted to answer Mr. Peterson's direct question about the timeline. And Mr. Wozniak explained it correctly that the intention is that this user, Mr. Peterson, is also an owner of the user who will be leasing this property from Somerset Storage. Their intention is to develop a separate property into a bigger facility, including indoor and outdoor uses, including fields and the like. And so for now, this is viewed as a temporary location for this business, but as Mr. Wozniak also stated, the intention is not to have a cap or a timeline at which time the CUP would expire. So asking for that the CUP be granted as requested without any deadline for the use, but just being open and explaining that the intention is that this use would transition elsewhere and this would revert back to self-storage.
Mr. Peterson, did you have some particular concern about this extending beyond the 3 years or terminating earlier than 3 years, or are you comfortable that that can be at the timing of the owner?
No, I'm okay with it as is.
Anything else, Mr. Carey?
Nothing.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Carey or Mr. Peterson? Nope, apparently not. Anybody else want to speak in favor of this application? How about opposition? Any opposition from anybody in the room? And again, just neutral comments, anything at all to help the board make a better decision and the best interests of the community. Board members, any thoughts or worries or concerns? If not, it's 10:16 and I'll declare an end, a closing of the hearing. We'll take no more evidence. Look straightforward to me. How about you, board members? Anybody ready with a motion or feel the need for further information that wasn't indicated in the questioning?
I move we approve this application.
Want to do it on the same terms as the board's or the staff's recommendation to us, adopting their language with a little tweak there.
Yes, as the staff's recommendation.
With a little tweak for the permit, yeah.
I'll second that.
Oh, thank you. Motion made and seconded. Any discussion or debate whatsoever? Nope. All in favor vote aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Unanimously approved. Again, the changes are minor typos, so we should have it ready for you shortly. Everybody okay to keep rolling here? Yeah. Okay.
Don't talk a lot.
Okay, Mr. Chair, Board of Adjustment members, we'll move on to our final conditional use permit request on this agenda. This request is from David Lockwood and involves his property at 215 North Ilwaco Road in the town of Troy. And I'll note that this property is in the Lower St. Croix Riverway Overlay District, and the request is for a conditional use permit for filling and grading within 40 feet of a slope preservation zone and toe of slope pursuant to the referenced section of the Riverway Overlay Ordinance. And the purpose of this filling and grading is to construct a detached accessory garage. And again, the staff report and the conditional use permit application has been provided with the packet materials for this item. I would just pull up a site map. This is a 38.85 acre property. A significant portion of the site has very steep slopes, over 25% grade, as indicated in the purple lavender color on this slide. And the general location of the project area, it's within that yellow circle oval here in the upper part of the slide. And I'll note that the project area is located just on either side of the driveway that comes in to access the dwelling, and it's between upper and lower bluffs. Therefore, there are two slope preservation zones that must be protected with setbacks from both top and of the bluff line and the toe of the slope. And a few more specifics about the site here. The site has one principal dwelling, two cabins, and several other structures located throughout the property. And the site is mostly wooded, a mostly wooded lot with deciduous trees on the Riverwood side. And steeper slopes are located along the west and Riverward side and in the east west center of the lot as well. The Board of Adjustment, you may remember, you addressed a variance request last year with Mr. Lockwood. He was wanting to replace an aging garage structure that's a 1940s vintage and in somewhat disrepair. The variance request was denied by the Board of Adjustment, and if the requested conditional use permit is approved, the applicant, I would just note, may remove the existing garage. The
Don't we have a limit imposed on us by NR 118 on the square footage of accessory structures? And if you add one of this size, doesn't another have to come out?
I guess the distinction I would say is the proposed structure would not be non-conforming, and where this structure is non-conforming, if it's removed, and Mr. Lockwood could clarify what his intention is regarding the structure.
But this structure will have an impermeable surface, its roof, and probably its approach, and so there will be an increase in impermeable surface on this lot, for which it seems to me there ought to be at least an equal reduction. Why did you not?
It is a 38-acre property, and so the percentage of impervious is limited given the size of the property. That's the only clarification I give it on that.
Please step up to the microphone if you're the expert on this.
The location of the structures, this non-conforming one and the new one is outside 300 feet of the ordinary high water mark, and so what you're referring to doesn't apply. So they are not in, and even if it did, they're not anywhere close to 15% impervious surface area on the site.
So the limit on square footage of accessory buildings does not apply, is what you're saying? Would you just introduce?
If they were
would you
within,
just, before you go on, Mr. Wozniak, state for the record the gentleman who spoke, his name?
That was Jared Wayner, a planner in our land use division.
Thanks. We never know what's going to be appealed.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
The next slide provides some details on the proposed site improvements as part of this proposed as part of this conditional use permit request. The improvements would include constructing an accessory detached garage with a footprint of 28 by 54 with up to a 2-foot roof overhang. So if you add 2 feet on each side, you would actually have a footprint of 32 by 58 feet, 1,856 square feet, and as you can see in the again laid out, this would be located along a existing driveway corridor where there was a driveway turnaround. Again, this may look familiar. The board did discuss this issue and the potential to potentially build a structure in this area that would better conform with ordinance requirements when you discussed the variance last year. The garage would be placed over a portion of the existing driveway, And I'll note that the applicant had proposed a rain garden with a capacity of 225 square feet proposed for stormwater runoff. That would be just to the north of the proposed structure with an overflow that would outlet to the west side of the driveway. Speaking specifically about stormwater improvements, the proposed rain garden is undersized due to the roof, the extra square footage that has to be accounted for roof overhang. And so it would have to be adjusted to 232 cubic feet, of storage capacity. The daylighting of the rain garden outlet, again, to the west side of the driveway, where I'm moving my cursor around here on the screen, is that would require riprap. So just a slight adjustment to what has been proposed. The downspouts or swales are not shown as part of the building on the proposed plan, but will need to be provided with a follow-up land use permit. Silt fencing needs to encompass the extent of the grading, and 70% vegetative cover needs to be established in any disturbed areas. The next slide provides an analysis of for the visual inconspicuous standard. And I would just call out here, either from the ordinary high or from 250 feet out in the river, the structure is supposed to be visually inconspicuous, and what this diagram indicates is the maximum height of the structure could be 19.77 feet, but based on where the footprint is proposed, the area closest to the river, that height is at 16.62 feet, and as you move back from the river, it rises up to a maximum of 19.77 feet. So little is, in terms of where a peak of the roof, the maximum it can be, it depends a little on the roof style. If it's a shed style roof, it can be a little higher further back, closer to the toe of the bluff where it rises up again. We haven't received any comments from the town of Troy at this time, and we have had contact from Wisconsin DNR, from Mr. Wendholz, and basically indicating that they expect the standards in the Riverway Overlay ordinance to be met, and generally the department, the DNR, supports the county staff reports recommendations as they relate to the Riverway regulations. Again, you have the option to approve this request, deny the request, or table it, postpone the decision to process information you've received or request additional information. We've included quite a few findings of fact and conclusions of law. In many respects, this isn't the most complicated request, but there are a lot of standards that apply within the Riverway for new construction, and we're just trying to be thorough with our actions. There are a couple specific things I will call out, though. First, again, I'll reiterate that the applicant filed an application for a conditional use permit for filling and grading within 40 feet of a slope preservation zone per the applicable section of the Riverway Overlay District regulations. And it's important to remember that they're within 40 feet. The bluff rises up from the river. There's a flatter area that includes where the driveway access is, and then the property slopes up again. And this is tucking in within 40 feet of the toe of the bluff where it rises up further to the east on the property. I will call out under provision 6 here in findings that the project is subject to the filling and grading standards in the Riverway Overlay District and stormwater and erosion control standards as well. And those are administered both through this conditional use permit and a land use permit. I'll note under number 7 in the findings that filling and grading is allowed by CUP if the standards in the ordinance are referenced. We've included the detail of these provisions in the findings just to make it very clear what standards this project is subject to. I won't read through all this, but can answer any questions the board may have on this material. And we also included the referenced stormwater management and erosion control standards. Again, I won't read through all the detail on this, but if you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask.
This time it's paragraph 12 for the automatic revocation.
Pardon. In staff recommendations, Mr. Chair, are you
Yep.
referring to?
Yep,
Yes.
page 124.
Yeah, we have a staff recommendation with 16 conditions recommended. The recommendation is for approval of the conditional use permit for filling and grading within 40 feet of slope preservation zone. I would call out here, I'm not going to go through all of these, but I'm going to detail a little bit on the first 8 of these recommendations. The filling and grading needs to be conducted per the submitted site plan or as otherwise identified by staff in this report. The stormwater and erosion control plan per standards in 17.36H7. I'll note that, and this one, there is a difference between what the applicant proposed and what staff is recommending. On number 3, the location of the foundation of the garage shall be shifted 5 feet riverward as to avoid disturbance of the slope preservation zone on the landward side of the construction site. So essentially avoid disruption beyond the toe of the slope into the slope preservation zone. The applicant had proposed the structure much closer to the toe of the slope and may wish to speak to this or answer any question the Board of Adjustment may have regarding. The concern of staff is, based on the level of detail we had with the site plan, we want to make sure that that slope preservation zone is not going to be disturbed. And so shifting it 5 feet would provide some additional confidence of that. Going further, that the foundation of the structure not exceed 28 by 54, and the roof overhang of the structure not exceed 2 feet from the wall of said structure. And overall, the height of the structure shall not exceed 19.7 feet and shall not be visible from the 250-foot riverwood setback from the ordinary high water mark. And I'd note in proposed condition number 7 that a land use permit shall be submitted to the department, and supporting application material shall include final building elevations with full dimensions, the color of all exterior finishes, interior layout and improvements, updated site plan showing the new location of the structure, that adjusting to the 5 feet from the toe of the slope, and an updated stormwater management plan with all corrections, including revegetation plan and any other documentation staff may determine as being necessary for conformance with the revisions of the Riverway Overlay District. Lastly, on number 8, the toe of the slope, 824 elevation, and the top of the bluff, 816 foot elevation, shall be identified and physically marked within the construction area prior to the initial pre-construction inspection, and shall remain until the final inspection is completed. And we would reiterate this requirement in a land use permit as well, but it's important to know on site where those key measures are located, so we can confirm that the ordinance provisions are being complied with. At that, staff can answer any questions you have, either myself or Mr. Weiner, who worked on this report, and I believe Mr. Lockwood is here if you have any questions or if he wishes to testify in hearing.
Board members? Mr. Nickum.
Along these projects, the erosion is always a concern. Explain to me the holding pond, and then it dumps into the riprap. Is that?
Yeah, the rain gardens or bioretention facilities, as they're referred to, they can absorb the cubic volume of water that they're designed for, and the intent is that that water will infiltrate into the ground. But if it's a bigger event, if they're overwhelmed, they're designed to overflow. And so in this case, there's an overflow that would take the water underneath the driveway, and where it daylights, that area would have to be rip-wrapped so that it doesn't create an erosion concern if in fact water overflows and outlets there. And during construction, proper erosion control has to be done for that area as well.
You have something, Joe?
Yeah, have you got a feel for how many cubic feet of material we're talking about?
The grade of the site is not being significantly modified. There's some preparation to get a level building site there, but the fact that it has to be modified subjects it to the filling and grading CUP. Within that 40 feet. If the structure was not within 40 feet of the toe of the slope, it would be a land use permit rather than a CUP.
I'm puzzled by number 9 and the conditions on 123, which says there shall not be plumbing of any kind internally or externally as a part of this project or added to the building until an evaluation of the private on-site wastewater treatment system is completed by an individual licensed by the state of Wisconsin and submitted to the county for review, and a permit to modify the system or connect to the system is issued. And now I'm assuming that there is no plan to install a wash basin or a toilet or anything like that in this building. Am I wrong?
That's correct. That's our understanding. If Mr. Lockwood or a subsequent owner of the property were to come back and wish to add plumbing, I think the point there is they would be subject to evaluation of the sanitary system.
Well, besides that, it's highly improbable because it would lead to the possibility of another residence on the property.
Well, I would say people have accessory structures with plumbing, with utility sinks, sometimes a restroom, if they have a shop that they work in. That's not uncommon.
Let's call on Mr. Lockwood to step up and speak in favor and say anything else you'd like to say.
Hi, my name's David Lockwood. I'm the applicant.
Yeah.
I just wanted to add to the number 9 there, the plumbing of any kind, internally or externally. I do plan to put in a closed loop in the floor heating system, which will be plumbed to a boiler, okay, from the floor to the boiler. So I don't know if that's considered part of the plumbing or not, but nothing with regards to running water or wastewater or anything like that. There's no plan for any of that type thing.
Thank you for the clarification. Okay. Yeah. While you're there, and I see you've got your associate with you, is there anything else you'd like to say about this application?
I brought my engineer along if he could answer any questions about the stormwater or the erosion or anything like that for the board. I do have, just seeking to understand from my standpoint, some questions about the conditions, the staff recommendation conditions. I'd like to talk about the location of the foundation being shifted 5 foot riverward. As you can see, the driveway turnaround is right in the area of where this foundation is being proposed. And shifting the foundation 5 feet riverwood would pretty much block most of that turnaround. I'm a little concerned that the town of Troy will ask me to put in a new turnaround because of the blocking of that turnaround. And their ordinance requires a significant size turnaround, a 90-foot in diameter turnaround, or one that will accommodate a 40-ton tandem axle truck. And that would push the driveway almost all the way out. Well, it pushed the driveway all the way out to the bluff line, the lower bluff line. So I'm concerned about moving it. It's kind of placed right now so that I retain as much of that turnaround as I can retain, and thus make it less risky to the town to say you don't have any turnaround.
Before I come to you, Mike, Engineer Pete, what's your last name, please?
Richard, excuse me, Richard Voigt. And I was just going to speak a little bit to
Richard Voigt?
Voigt.
Thank you. It's probably in these papers. I just didn't take note of it.
It is.
With respect to this shifting of the foundation, have you thought about that from an engineering standpoint and mapped it out on the property?
We have not yet. We just got the recommendation. So,
okay.
But
so you don't.
It will make it. It is a tight site, as you know. It's for being 38.8 acres. The buildable area between the slopes is pretty narrow, and our goal is to stay as far back from the bluff, the downslope, the 816 contour, pushing it as far away from the river. That was our underlying goal. The construction would come in because there's minimal grading, as Mr. Wozniak noted, coming in, if you will, cutting into the slope just a little bit to get the elevation right. But it's thankfully not much excavation there. And then the stormwater pond will get adjusted as we don't have a final building design yet. We've assumed and stated a maximum 2-foot overhang, and so we'll work with staff on the land use permit with that. Thank you,
Mr. Wozniak.
I guess the only thing I would add is the Board of Adjustment has the authority to, by conditional use permit, to allow the filling and grading essentially up to that toe of slope, but not beyond it without a variance. And the issue here would be if you for example, would be comfortable with what Mr. Lockwood's proposal showed, are you confident that that would not necessitate grading or disruption beyond that toe of the slope? That, we were trying to leave a little margin there with that, setting it back 5 feet. That's our simple way of looking at this.
Sure. Now, the turnaround itself, is that, well, at some point it's likely to be paved, and even if it isn't paved, it becomes crushed and becomes essentially an impervious surface that'll likely tend to carry water to the bluff during a rain event or an ice melt, leading to the potential for erosion from that cause as well. Did you have the opportunity, did you have the statistics and data furnished to you, Mr. Wozniak, so you could evaluate that risk? Maybe you weren't even aware that the town has this 90-foot radius requirement, if it in fact does.
We were aware, because that did come up when the variance was considered. But in terms of my understanding and my view of this is Mr. Lockwood is trying to fit the building in and minimize the level of modification of that driveway. Would that be characterized right? And I think if the building's adjusted, there may be a question whether the town requires more modification and potentially more impervious surface.
I'll bet you that Mr. Ware has thought about this.
I would just like to note that there's nothing that's requiring the applicant to build a building of this size. So we could modify the condition to either shift the building 5 feet over, or the building is shrunk by 5 feet in width to avoid that any disturbance in the slope preservation zone.
Did you have a chance to look at the potential for erosion on the riverward side of the turnaround?
Well, as long as nothing changes, which nothing was proposed, so I didn't review that because nothing was proposed.
Okay, but if we shift the foundation of the building and don't shrink the size of the building,
well, if you look here, on the plans that were submitted to staff, I'll just zoom in here, the building is going over the driveway. So they're gonna have to, right now, this building would not meet the town of Troy's ordinance if it were constructed in this location over the driveway as it's presented.
right? And your proposal would shift it another 5 feet to the left on the picture that you're showing us.
Correct.
So the turnaround would shift further to the left. And
So if they wanted to modify the turnaround, they would have to come in for an additional conditional use for that, as that's not addressed in this one.
Are those 2-foot contour marks, or are they 5-foot contour marks?
I believe they're two.
Or something else? 2-foot, huh?
The other thing too here is because this is in Riverway, the Riverway overlay does supersede general zoning.
Does that mean that we, by decision of this board, could overrule the town of Troy's turnaround requirement, you're saying?
It would create some sort of conflict. They would have to make some adjustment on their end. And if they didn't, then, I mean, we would have an issue here. The applicant would, the easy solution would be to shrink the building.
That's if you don't, easy for us to say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's 28 by 54. That's a very large building for this location. He's got 40 acres. There are other locations that this building could be constructed. So.
Now, if we tell the town of Croix that they can't require a 90-foot turnaround, then do we assume the responsibility if a fire truck can't turn around in there?
There are other apparatus that they have that can fit in there. They have, without having to seen their ordinance or their reasoning for their ordinance, that's in my experience, I've never had a requirement, seen a requirement like that even, let alone I've worked with numerous fire departments, and they've never voiced a concern with a longer driveway. They've voiced concern with the width of driveways more so than the turnaround at the end.
Yeah, I think going from memory, but I think the town of Hudson, where I live, has an 80-foot radius requirement. I see there's a town board member here. Do you happen to want to step up to our microphone and tell us about your turnaround ordinance or anything else that and I understand you probably don't speak for your board, but you can speak as a knowledgeable citizen.
Your
Jan
name
Kusha,
Town of Troy. I didn't sign in, but I can. Also, the reason for my being here is for observational purposes. Mr. Wozniak presently stated that the Town of Troy has no comments, submitted no comments. But in response to the driveway issue and talking to Mr. Lockwood this morning where he inquired briefly of it and looking up my ordinance right now, I believe he's probably referring to the driveways longer than 300 feet. Yes. Is that what this is? Yes. So I'll just read the ordinance.
Sure, then we'll have it in the record.
Driveways longer than 300 feet shall be designed and built to provide continuous 14-foot height clearance and either a turnaround with a minimum 90-foot diameter or shall otherwise of significant area and designed to accommodate the turning around of a 40-foot long tandem axle truck. Bypasses or turnarounds may be substituted for turnarounds only with the advance approval of the Plan Commission. And I think this next sentence is probably most important. Pre-existing driveways are exempt from this requirement. And this is a pre-existing driveway, I would take it. We're not creating a new driveway here. So that would be my response. Any other questions before I leave?
Well, I'm thinking. Thank you. I suppose that this applicant is going to say that if he builds his building of the proposed size and shifted 5 feet over, that the remaining existing driveway will be inadequate for his personal use, and therefore he will be coming to apply for a new driveway, and the new requirements will apply to it. I see Mr. Lockwood nodding in the background, so probably that's his thought process as well. But if I interpreted the ordinance on the fly properly, a turnaround is not the only way to provide for a 40-foot length vehicle.
Bypass or turnout.
Yeah, so the opportunity to do a backing in and turning around kind of thing would appear to be an option the Planning Commission might approve for the town of Troy. Is that the way it strikes you too?
That is correct.
Now, you served on the Planning Commission, I think I've heard over the years.
I currently am.
And you currently are. Have you ever approved a backing and turning type of thing as a substitute?
I don't know that we've had such a request. I can say that we have many Riverway properties that don't have good turnarounds existing. Fire chief has, asked us to do something about it, and we felt that there really very little we can do with pre-existing driveways. So that's about all I could answer on that. Certainly, if there was I don't see this as a request for a new driveway. There's an existing driveway, correct? I have not been to the site to know where the driveway is, but it sounds like the building's being put over the existing driveway?
Yeah, can you see that print there?
That's the
Is
very
the red
end of a
line the
long
driveway?
driveway.
Pardon me?
That's the very end of a lengthy driveway that accesses through Mr. Lockwood's 38 acres.
And so that kind of stippled surface there is apparently the driveway. That's the way I'm interpreting it anyway. And the box shape there, that rectangular shape, is labeled the proposed garage. And the staff's recommendation here, because of the encroachment on the toe of the slope on our right there, and not wanting to destabilize that area, is the proposal is to shift that thing to the left about 5 more feet. And, to get a sense of scale, you can kind of tell, what's the width of that building again? Oh, there it is. 28. So, about another 1/5 of its, 1/5 to 1/6 of its width being moved over there, covering more of that stippled surface. But on the other hand, you see that the driveway is longer than this building. I mean, it extends beyond the building, and so there's some sort of potential for being able to use that as a back and turn area.
And that's true because at the end of this driveway, it's kind of where you go into that old carport. And so there's a area there that could be used as a backup and out. I just don't know if they'll accept that.
Yeah, I'm inclined to think this maybe has so many complications here that we ought to table it for a month and give the applicant the time to appear before the planning commission of the town and to give Mr. Boyd a chance to do some sketching and calculating here. Yes, Jared.
Can I ask a couple other clarifying questions?
Sure, we aren't done yet.
So the town board member indicated that they wouldn't view this as a new driveway, that it's an existing driveway, and their code, as she read in the record, stated that existing driveways are exempt from that standard. So I believe that to be a non-issue with this application.
So you'd take the view that modifying a driveway doesn't make it a new driveway?
If their code says new driveway, that means new driveway, not existing or modified.
You may be right. Mr. Lockwood?
Should I go on to the other questions I have here? I just don't know. And you're right. I'm taking, if I do move it, I just take the risk of them putting me in a more difficult position.
Yeah, but of course, if we're going to permit you to engage the toe of the slope there, then we're going to have a variance application and another fee and another notice and all of that.
Yeah, I'm definitely not engaging the toe of the slope. The 2.1 foot there for the foundation, that's away from the toe of the slope. And so, and I've talked to my engineer, he can attest to this, that disturbance of the slope preservation zone, they believe they can do the grading without disturbing the slope preservation zone.
Go ahead with your next points then.
All right.
Or were you about to speak, Mr. Wozniak?
No,
Yeah.
Just a question, the number 10 about the length of time,
Right.
is the 2 years from the beginning of construction or from approval of the conditional use permit? Just a clarification for me.
We usually take it from the date that I sign the paper
The approval
for you.
of the condition, okay.
Yeah.
All right. This is a summer place primarily for us right now, and so we don't use it in the winter, and there's really no access through that long driveway in the winter. And so I'm just a little concerned about getting it all done in one summer season, you know, one season type of thing. Because I've had a year to get the permit, the rest of the permits, and start construction, and then I'll only have one season to complete construction.
Well, let me put it this way. I don't want to speak for the staff because it's possible that somehow you might get crosswise with them and we end up having this back on a kind of an appeal from a staff decision. But I think this has, I can't think of a time when this has become an issue.
Okay.
Because in the past, the staff was always willing to work with people and process an extension of time, so long as you showed diligent effort, that you were going forward and that
I'm
there
making
were
progress.
there were weather-related or other types of reasons
Okay.
for the delay.
All right, thank you.
As I say, I can't make promises, but I can talk about the past.
All right,
Jared's wagging his head left to right, meaning that he doesn't agree.
If you want that to change, then you need to reflect that in the conditions.
I see no need to change it.
Then that means his project needs to be, if it's approved today, it needs to be completed on May 25th, 2025.
Well, if you're changing the department's attitude,
Well,
then yeah, we can work with that.
that's what Ted is stating.
Mr. Sheriff, I could just clarify on, for example, on the land use permit part of this, typically the county approves the land use permit for a year, but has the ability, staff have the ability to give 2 6-month extensions, so essentially extend it out to 2 years. And we generally work within that and then could subject the applicant to have to reapply if they haven't, completed in 2 years.
Mike, would that mean that the grading needed to be completed
Well,
in this time frame, and then the structure could be?
I was going to go on to say, the Board of Adjustment has discretion on this time frame for completion with the conditional use permit. And I would use an example, maybe it's a big example, but when you acted on the St. Croix Valley solar project, the big solar project, you did allow a greater time frame for initiating the project and completing than we typically do.
So there's no bar to us saying that for good cause shown, the department may grant no more than 2 6-month exceptions.
Correct. And in order to, this does allow 2 construction seasons. Yes, to start within a year. Start is a very, broad term, and he has 2 construction seasons, basically 2 years to complete it. So he has until, again, as was said, May of 2025, which is all of the rest of this year, all of next year, and then on. It would probably be not a problem to say if there's something that needs to be done, if they've identified an issue, like working with the town of Troy, then add another, make it longer, set a specific date, or say an additional 1 6-month, so they would have the whole construction season of 2025. But I can't see where we would need to go longer than that. But that's up to you guys.
You heard that, Mr. Lockwood?
I heard it.
And you've got to work with the town, of course,
Yep.
on this matter. And so, if we give the zoning administrator the authority to grant 1 6-month extension, only if you show good cause for it, do you imagine you can work within that?
I imagine it could.
Do you promise you can?
I will try to the best of my ability to. I can't control the town planning commission or any of that.
What were your other points?
The only other thing I wanted to make clear here was that I had submitted a land use permit application here in November, and there were some missing pieces of information that are outlined here, but there are some pieces of information that have since been provided, and so I just wanted to see if number 7 could be tightened up, the wording tightened up to match the conditions that are outlined here in the staff recommendations and the things that we talked about, like the plumbing for the closed loop floor system and things like that.
I'm not getting your drift. Say,
Oh, I'm
say it
sorry.
again in different words. What do you mean, tightened up?
Well, it says here, a land use permit shall be submitted. Well, I believe the department issues me a land use permit. I submit a land use permit application.
Yeah.
Number 1, that's number 1.
I'm putting in the word application.
And then it says, and the supporting application material. Well, there's material about where the site's located and other things like that that I have already submitted, both in the variance and the CUP and in the LUP that I submitted in November. So do I have to resubmit all that again? And
No, as I understand it, you've got to supplement it until they've got everything they
that's
need.
what I'm trying to say is this
I-
is supplemental.
I think that's what it
information.
says.
What?
I believe that's what it says.
It says, shall be
you-
submitted to the department and the supporting application material.
If I could just say, we always, if you've already got one submitted, we frequently have something already submitted.
Okay.
But this is our standard language in case there isn't.
Okay,
So I don't think we have to clarify that you already submitted one.
okay.
It's not
And then-
needed.
And we're
Are
not
you
going to
guys-
make a determination here as a board that it's sufficient. That's
Okay.
for the
Oh,
staff
no,
to
no,
do.
I understand that perfectly.
Yep.
And then just a reminder about the plumbing, saying plumbing of any kind.
Well, it says it needs to have all the approvals and a permit be issued for it. You don't know,
In number 9,
in number 9.
there shall not be plumbing of any kind internally or externally.
Yeah, but then it goes on to say, and this was my concern, but you didn't see it, until an evaluation is completed, et cetera, and a permit is issued.
Okay.
You wouldn't expect it to be different than
Yeah,
that.
well, I would expect it not to be applicable because there is no running water or wastewater. But there will be plumbing for the closed loop floor heating system. That's all I'm saying.
Jared,
So,
do you
just-
think
I
that's
guess
covered?
Yeah, that is something that that's covered. So by state statute, plumbing is defined as running water and wastewater. And so what he's describing is an HVAC system, and that does not apply to this.
Ah, all right. We got to leave 9 in there for the guy who buys your property next, and wants to do something that is defined as plumbing requiring a permit. But you've heard the staff interpretation here.
Any questions for me now? I'll shut up and let you
Board
guys
members?
talk.
Okay. Anybody else in the room who wants to speak in favor of this application? How about opposition? Anybody want to speak in opposition? Or in a neutral fashion, not declaring themselves particularly either way? Anything else you wanted to say, Mrs. Kusha? Nope. Please do sign our document before you leave. Anything else from the staff?
Nothing else unless the board has any questions.
The only things I have, and of course we haven't submitted this to a motion or much less a vote at this time, but I would suggest only trivial, well, what I consider small changes. The insertion of the word application in number 7, right after the words land use permit. And depending on how the board members feel about it, I suggest that for good cause, that we add to number 10. For good cause, the zoning administrator may grant 1 6-month extension. You board members, are you thinking of anything that we want to get out on the table here before I close the hearing? All right, it's all in, all set, I guess. So it's 11:12 by the official clock here, and I'm closing the hearing. There'll be no more evidence taken. We'll see if we can move forward to a decision, or if we're going to be tabling this for further information or processing by somebody else or any other such thing. Board members, I guess you've just heard me make my proposal. I'll just make it in the form of a motion that we adopt the staff recommendation with the one addition of a word in section 7 and the addition of that's the word application. And in 10, adding at the end of the sentence, or adding a final sentence in 10, capital F. For good cause, the zoning administrator may grant 1 6-month extension. There's a motion. Does anybody feel like they want to second it? If you don't like those ideas, don't second it.
I'll second the motion.
All right. We have a motion and a second. So now, amendments, debate, discussion. Where do you want to go on this?
Okay, the only question I want to clarify is the 5-foot change to the structure. So as it stands now, the board is the
staff recommended it, so that would be something, if we pass this motion,
Right.
that will become our requirement, that it be shifted that 5 feet.
Right, okay.
If you had a question on that, I can answer.
No, I don't have any question. I just wanted to clarify what the plan was.
I'm wondering, so what, the engineer feels that they could safely avoid that back area, for lack. So where are we leaving them? Is there no latitude for them either way?
Well, they've got to work it out with the town of Troy, is where we're leaving it.
Okay.
We're letting them have the building they propose in its large size. But we're shifting it over, according to the staff recommendation, to give a little more space from the toe of that internal slope there. Slopes are a big deal these days, particularly with, larger rainfalls coming upon us. And we see buildings in California washing off into the ocean and all that kind of stuff. And so we take them pretty seriously in the Riverway.
I'm good with that.
You are? I see heads nodding. Jared's ready to answer any question, no matter how weird it may seem. And so we're ready for a vote then, I think. All in favor, vote aye.
Aye.
And opposed, nay. And that's unanimously approved. So that deals with that. We have we have a few more items of business. We have the opportunity to hear from another county department here about camping regulations and all that. Get some background, and then we got an election to conduct. And if you weren't sick of me before today, I'm sure you are now. So I'm looking forward to being replaced. Buried my agenda here. Yes. Public health update.
Good morning, everyone.
Hi.
My name is Lori Diaby. I'm the public health supervisor. Kelly Engen, the health officer, is here with me today. And we were asked to present some general information on the campground code. And so I put together these slides and presentations. I don't want to read them. You had a chance to look at them in advance, but I will go over them. These are kind of the key points of our process, as well as the code kind of we go through. So, okay, I was warned the mouse is very sensitive.
You can use the up and down button too on
Oh.
the keyboard.
Okay. Oops. Not that up. Somehow I went. Am I going the wrong direction?
You're going the wrong direction.
Oh. Oh. I used. Yeah, I don't think I'll use the arrows because it sent it all the way to the top. Yeah. You can go to the second. Use that, okay. Okay. All right, so St. Croix County Public Health has an agent contract with DATCP, which is Department of Agriculture, Trade and Consumer Protection, since 2002 to license and inspect a number of license types, which includes campgrounds. At that point of time when we took over the agent contract, all the existing licensing under that transferred over to us. Campgrounds are both licensed and inspected annually by our staff, and our authority is based on Chapter 40, St. Croix County's Ordinance Chapter 40, Lodging, Food, and Recreation, as well as ATCP 79, which is the state campground code. We have no additional requirements in our ordinance as far as the requirements of campgrounds beyond in our ordinance, so we're enforcing the language of the state code. Currently, we have 13 licensed campgrounds in St. Croix County, and I'll just note that 10 of the 13 were existing when we first took over the agent contract. So it's been a slow growth in the last 20 years of campgrounds. Just big picture, just so you have an idea of the other license types that we inspect. We inspect restaurants, retail food establishments, pools, tourist rooming houses, hotels, motels, bed and breakfast, recreational educational camps, the tattoo and body art facilities, which is under a DSPS contract, as well as the manufactured home parks, which is also a DSPS contract. In total, we license around over 600 facilities. I looked up when I put this together, and our database showed 650 facilities. And we also have a DNR contract that we, with the transient non-community water supplies in the county, and we have about 120 of those. And of course, we enforce the human health hazard ordinance and we also do animal bites, beach sampling, lead, radon, and we address a number of other environmental health issues in the county with cooperation with our state partners.
How many full-time equivalents do you have?
We have, in the total in the environmental health program, we have 2.7 employees, 2.7 FTEs, I should say, in the environmental health program total. We have, depending on how you look at, when you look at the time breakdown, about 1.4 equivalent FTEs in the agent contract licensing and inspection program. So the remaining 1.3, when you take 2.7 minus 1.4, is kind of all the other environmental health aspects of our program.
Are you required to actually physically visit these 13 towns annually?
Yes. Yep. And we do a minimum of one routine inspection a year, and then we also would go out additionally if we got a complaint or a concern, or if there was a reinspection required. They may have additional inspections beyond one a year. Yep. I'm going to go slowly so I don't bump this. So here's the definition of a campground. A permit is required if a property has 4 or more sites, or if they have less than 4 and they're advertising themselves as a campground, they would also need a permit. We have 2 types of campground licenses. We have what we call the regular annual campground, which is, when you look at ATCP 79, all but one little teeny section is the requirements for the regular annual, and the one little teeny section that is the category of special event campground is a very small category in there, and there's very limited requirements for the special event license. We have 5 license categories that's based on the number of sites, and it's basically, we have these categories. It's sort of fiscally, each one incrementally is a little bit more per license. So 1 to 5, 25, all the way up to 200 or more sites is the last category. These are the types of campsites that the code allows: an individual campsite, a group campsite, the seasonal campsite, and a rustic campsite. And just so you have an idea, when we look at how many sites can be on a property, the code requires that the maximum is 20 sites per acre. I think that 20 sites per acre has been there for quite a while. I'd have to look at the history of the code to see. I know that none of the campgrounds that we have now exceed that for the regular annual campground. Keep in mind that when you get to the special event campground, there's no density requirement for the special event camping. So that 20 sites per acre doesn't apply for a special event campground. Yep, when you talk about camping units, it's important to understand these distinctions, because when you get deeper into the code, they talk about dependent and independent camping units. So an independent camping unit, pretty simply, is one that has a toilet on it that they're wanting to dispose of waste. A dependent campground or campsite is anything that doesn't have a toilet. So it could be simple as a tent, or it could be, I'm not, there's a lot of different ones, but basically no toilet. That's how we summarize it. These are just some different other examples. So a tent, as I mentioned. A camping cabin, that's kind of a trend that you'll see on campgrounds in more recent years, where they'll have a small cabin that has very basic amenities in it. There's also, we don't have any of these in our campgrounds, but across the state they're called a yurt. And both of these would be considered a camping cabin. The requirement is that they're less than 400 square feet. So they don't have to meet the general UDC, Uniform Dwelling Code requirements, and they're considered a site of the campground. They don't require any, they're not considered a tourist rooming house, or they're just considered a site on the campground. Recreational vehicles, there's all kinds of those. They're not supposed to exceed 445 square feet, and like the park model example, that little picture here that looks like a little mobile home, those also have to be less than 400 square feet. If they're over 400 square feet, they're considered a manufactured home, and those are not under the campground license. And also tourist rooming houses is another example. That would be a, quote, cabin per se, that's over 400 square feet, and those would require that they meet the Uniform Dwelling Code, and they would not be part of the campground and would require separate licensing if they wanted to have them available to rent to transients, not if they're renting month to month. If someone lives there, then they don't need a license for those. Just to give you an idea of the layout of a campground for spacing, the spacing of campgrounds, you can see like the little yellow porch and the little amenities. For campgrounds that are after after February of 2016, the 10-foot of separation between their amenities on the campsite and the neighboring campsite, there's supposed to be 10 feet of separation. Prior to that, it was only the camping unit itself had to be 10 feet away from the camping unit at the next site. Sites are to be designated with at least a 2-inch lettering or number system. They have to be within 400 feet of potable water, as well as the restrooms within 400 feet of potable, or 400 feet of each site. A dump station, does everybody know what a dump station is? Okay. So dump stations are required if a campground allows independent camping units, and keep in mind those are those ones with the toilets and they want to use the toilet on the campground. They are required to have a dump station if the sites themselves are not sewered sites. So if they can pull in and hook up to an approved sewered system right on the site, they don't need a dump station. The other caveat is if the campground allows, currently it's 20 sites, it used to be 30, or not sites, units. If a campground restricts to 20 or less independent camping units that have toilets, then they can have an alternate plan. They don't have to install a dump station. They could, normally it's a written letter from a neighboring dump station that's within 25 miles that their campers can use that dump station. In the past, they've also approved in the alternate plan I think the term is honey wagon service, that could come on site and service the independent camping units for disposal of their waste. Showers are not required on a campground, but many campgrounds have them. If they have showers, then they just need to comply with the building code requirements for showers. Roadways are there to minimize hazards on the entrance and exit and provide access for emergency vehicles through the campground. Garbage containers are required. And then I didn't go into great detail on the slide, but the campground code does set requirements for the site locations away from any identified hazards. Areas included that are prone to flooding, if there's animal housing, petting zoos. There's also a provision in there about if they have a fish cleaning house on the property, that we look at distances from those as well. Other things that we look at the campground is we're there generally to look for basic health and safety kinds of things. So we're looking to make sure that the campgrounds are clean, that they're being maintained. We look at the garbage and refuse, if that's being disposed of. They're required to have a safe water result. We look at their water distribution system and their pout systems, a very basic overview of those systems. Obviously, we can't see what's underground, et cetera, but we do look for backflow prevention at the campgrounds. Insect and rodent control, fire extinguishers and smoke detectors, and carbon monoxide detectors are required if they have if it's applicable for the permanent structures that they have there. So, for example, the camping cabins, if a camping cabin, we look to make sure that they have a smoke detector in the camping cabin. Carbon monoxide detectors are required in structures if they have fuel burning appliances. So we would look for carbon monoxide detectors if that was applicable. Fire rings are to be 5 feet from camping units or structures. That's if anything, if it's a campground that's licensed after February of 2016, which is the last time the code was updated. They added a few things, and then it's some of the things they required, they call, I think you said a term, grandfather. You know, anything that happens after after that code went into effect, not anything, because they'll specify if it's applicable for everybody or everybody after a certain point. Emergency phone or information on where the closest phone is located. And then camp register, we look to make sure that they have a campground registration system. It can be written or electronic. And the pieces of information that they should be collecting is the name of the principal renter, their contact information, the number of people that are in the party or in their group that are camping, and then the dates that they're staying there. And they need to keep those records for 1 year. Most campgrounds nowadays have an electronic system, you know, where you can register your sites or reserve your sites through an online system. And then this was the section that I was telling you about the other license category type, which is the special event campgrounds. These are kind of, so they're good, the permit is good for up to 14 days, and it would be camping that's allowed for some kind of a special event. And the things that they have to include on their application is the number of people that they estimate will be camping at their event, the water source and distribution method for water, as well as the number and location of the toilets and how they plan to service and maintain the toilets, and the number and location of garbage, and the method for disposal of liquid waste. For campgrounds, special event campgrounds, for events, special campground events after February of 2016, there is a requirement that the sites themselves be at least 800 square feet. But for existing special events, that requirement isn't there. And that's kind of the only one now for after 2016 that sort of puts a stamp on density and the spacing of sites throughout a special event campground. Special event campgrounds, all the other items that I mentioned before this don't apply to them, so they don't have to do site designation, you know, like all of that. Yeah, so the permit is 14 days, potable water has to be provided free of charge. And the number of toilets that have to be available for a regular campground or for a temporary event, special event, is different than the regular campground, the formula that they use to determine how many bathrooms they need. I kind of went through that fast, but it's kind of a general overview of what we are looking for and how our program works. If you have any other questions.
Does everybody have to be out at least every 2 weeks? Is that, suppose that a campground wanted to stage special events at periodic intervals, let's say major holidays or some 3-day weekends, that kind of thing. Why not just get the special event permit and everybody's going to be gone after the weekend is over? Is that the way it works usually?
Well, if you had a campground that had, I think you said a campground that had special events, so are you saying you might have the possibility where you have a campground that's licensed that has a annual campground license, where for special events, if they want to increase their camping capacity or increase their camping area. For certain events, they could apply for, in addition to their regular campground license, a special event license for those particular events so they can increase their camping capacity. I think your question is, why could they do that every time they do an event? Yes, they could, but it would be much more expensive for them because then they'd be buying multiple licenses.
The special event license is significantly more expensive than the regular?
It's the same pricing based on the 5 categories, based on number of sites.
Okay, so the idea from an economic standpoint is that the regular annual is preferable so long as it meets the business plan needs of the entity for the number of rentals that they would like to have.
Right.
Yes.
I would disagree with that, because if they have a permanent annual license, then they would have to have a lot of improvements in their facility in terms of permanent restrooms and other types of facilities. So I think that based on what we've seen from the other side of it, it's much cheaper for them to keep getting special event permits and temporarily doubling or tripling the size of their campground without providing sufficient facilities.
Oh, I see.
I think that's way cheaper, and I think that's unfortunately. How many special event camping permits do you get requested each year? And how many different locations, campgrounds are they at?
Keep in mind, this is pulling numbers off the top of my head, but
Sure.
I believe on average we license between 4 and 5 special event campgrounds in the last few years, and they've been primarily one campground.
Question on existing campgrounds, do you ever go in and verify that they've not increased the campsites in their permit?
Yeah, we go out every year and do annual inspections of the sites that are there, and make sure that they have the site designation and all of that. And if a campground wants to do a modification to increase the number of sites, they would reach out to us and say, hey, we want to add this many sites, and then we would look at it, they should submit a plan review, and then we go out and do an on-site inspection.
I know
to
what
look
they
at.
should do, but there's been instances where the permit number has
Yeah.
been less than what's been available.
Yeah, sometimes, they expand, and we have to go out and make sure that they, kind of backwards, the opposite. Ideally, the way it should be is they reach out to us before they add the sites. And part of the, as you see, like they have a category of license, so they have 1 to 25 sites, 50 to 100, 100 to 150, and that's the number that appears on their license, is the license category they're in. And we have had occasions where operators think that because they're in that category, that means that they can do campsite creep, up to, and as long as they stay in that same category.
Do they ever get fined?
Fined?
Yeah, if they're over the number, or
No, we haven't issued fines for,
who enforces that?
well, if we went out and a campground was at a different number of sites than what they had previously shown on their campground map, then the sites that they have added, we'd look at to make sure that they, have site designation, the separation, and all of that is in meets the code requirements.
So there's no penalty for them to expand?
We have not issued penalties.
How do you, I noticed that permits are required if certain offerings are made, and you list some of the places where one might look to see if offerings are made, VRBO, Airbnb, et cetera, like that. Is it practical for your limited staff to do Facebook searches and Instagram searches and other website searches looking for busy weekends and presentations by campground operators of numbers that might be excessive beyond the permit limit?
We do scan social media periodically for unlicensed facilities. A lot of what we're seeing through that activity is not camping much. It's more of the tourist rooming houses where people are vacation rental, they're renting out their homes. And that requires a tourist rooming house. Using those websites is helpful to identify that someone is making their property available for that type of rental, but it's not super easy to exactly find them because they don't put an address, that kind of thing. But we have ways of figuring out. They show pictures of the property, whatever. Like we try to put the pieces together of where the property is, and then we reach out to them. These types of licenses that we issue, it's common knowledge to our staff that people need, a license to rent a tourist rooming house or the different various types, but it's not necessarily common knowledge to the average public person to know what the code requirements are and that they need a license. And we always try to work with people to gain compliance and inform them of the license requirements. Like, we'll send a letter to say, hey, you may not know, we don't word it like this, but you may not know that it requires a license, but this is the process that you would need to do if you want to continue this type of business.
How about the licensed campgrounds, as in Facebook or whatever? If they're advertising, they have 3 times the number of sites they're authorized to. Do we go after them at that?
Yes, we would notify them that if we know that they're having a big event out there, and we know, like, if they're only licensed for 10 sites and they're advertising, huge event, and they're advertising that they're going to allow camping, when we're aware of it, we inform that they would need to have an additional special event camping license to exceed their normal capacity.
Your assistant is signaling that she'd like to share the microphone with you.
Oh, sure.
I've forgotten when the last time was.
It's been a while. I think some of you have realized that with the limited staff that our environmental health section has within public health, we do not spend time searching for trouble. And when I say trouble, I mean that in the searching for violations is the more appropriate way to state that. But certainly when things are brought to the attention of the health department, such as a tourist rooming house that may be operating illegally or not licensed the right way, then we can address it. But we really don't have time to search out issues with our limited staff. I just wanted to make that clear because I thought that was the question.
Yeah. Do you get referrals from the sheriff's department too?
Occasionally. I don't think the sheriff's department is the common source of other departments that may inform us, but like community development may let us know about something that's happening, or a lot of times where we get information is from the other facilities that we license when they have heard that so-and-so is doing something on their property and they were required to have a license. How come this guy is doing it and without a license? So, that, and then our inspectors are out driving, roadsides, you know, like it would be a common conversation to come in on a day when people are in the office. Oh, hey, did you know what? I drove by so-and-so's place. Did you see XYZ, you know, or, you know, because our people are out driving around doing inspections. They're doing a lot of, with 650 facilities, I don't have the number in front of me, but I think in 2022, our staff did like 900 and some facility inspections in the last year. But again, don't quote me on that. I'm going off memory.
Well, with 200 working days in the year, that would be
It's a lot.
several every day.
Yep, yep.
Ellen's got a question.
Yes.
So, you know, we've been in touch with you guys, Lori especially, off and on for the last quite a few years now about a wide variety of problems with campground sites. Riverdale was the first one, how we had it like, you know, a permit for a certain number, and you guys had different numbers and different records and asked for copies of your records, and then there was discrepancies between what we understood. We have another one, the facility involved in the airport facility, that the county's permit only allows 17 campers there, but they have about 75 at this time, and you guys are inspecting it every year. But so what can we do, because we've been talking about this for a long time. Another one is the one where the permit that we had was for 100 or less, and they were advertising 300, and you guys were allowing up to 200, and I don't know that you ever changed your permit officially to allow up to 300. I don't know that or not, but those discrepancies and not, you know, following the permit we issue, how can we coordinate better so that you guys are not allowing more than what we're allowing?
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, go ahead. No, I was just going to say, like, if we know that you guys have limits on it, then that would help us to know what to do. So I don't know how we can be, you know, if you share with us that there is a limit on a property, then we know it. I will also say that we inspect several administrative codes, and the campground code is the only code that doesn't have language in it that says that we can hold a license or not renew it if there's any issues with any other jurisdiction, local jurisdiction, as long as it has to do with health and safety and has to do with the type of business that they have. So all the other codes that we enforce has language like that. So if we were aware that, you know, zoning officer, town of, you know, some township had some requirements that was stricter than what we have in our code, we can hold the license for that property as again, as long as that litmus is it relates to health and safety and has to do with the license type that we're operating. Specifically with campgrounds, that language is not in the campground code. So if it says, an operator applies to a license for us and they meet our code requirements, we don't do this, plug our ears and, you know, like pretend we don't know that we tell people on our applications and on our renewals, we tell them that there may be other jurisdictions that have other requirements. Or other departments, yes. Like, you know, that they need to contact zoning or building inspectors or DNR. You know, there's other layers of enforcement. But that said, if specifically with the campground code, even though that language isn't there, if we're aware, we want to be good partners and, right, you know, work together.
And I think I'm just going to address this too, and I think we've talked about this, Ellen, and you know, and not to make excuses for department, but COVID has been a huge part of our health department's lives for the last 3 years. We talked, I want to collaborate among departments as much as I can. We talked before COVID hit about oh, it looks like we have some ordinances that kind of touch on the same things. Let's get together and make sure, we're being the best partners and, I don't know what the proper term is, making sure we're each following through with each other's ordinance and there's not a huge contradiction in them. So I think continuing to partner, COVID has slowed down. Hopefully we can get back to something a little bit cleaner.
Heather, can we,
I do also.
given that they don't have the authority to revoke or suspend permits because of noncompliance with our land use requirements, the opposite is not true, isn't it? If we have a condition that CUP holders must have up-to-date, must be meeting the standards of the health department, we can seek revocation of our permits, can't we?
Yes, and the good thing is when we repealed and recreated Chapter 15 in December of 2019, we added to the code under campgrounds that the applicant has to comply with ATCP 79, and so that will be a condition of any future campground CUPs, and that's what public health regulates is ATCP 79. So I think the past issue that we just recently had, there's a couple things that was concerning, and I think why we couldn't enforce the 100 campsites. One, it wasn't a condition in the permit that it only have 100 campsites. Second, as soon as zoning alerted public health that he has more than 100 campsites, public health went out there, did an inspection, informed the applicant that he had to pay an additional fee and had to have a re-inspection done and have the permit reissued for 200 plus sites. So I think public health is willing to, if they know there's a conditional use permit and zoning can provide that, it says, this campground shall have no more than 150 campsites. Public health will know that, tell the applicant that. If they see, 300 campsites, report that back to zoning that this campground has 300 campsites. I think that's a violation of the conditional use permit. Then that way community development can do something about it. I think public health can only regulate what they can regulate, and unfortunately we can't make our ordinance more restrictive than what the state's code says, because we are just an agent of the state. We are not doing this independently. We're under contract with the state to enforce ATCP 79. So I think and hopefully that's the collaboration that public health and CDD can have in the future. I know there's other cases where they go out jointly to inspect for junk or, let's say, human health hazards that are also a zoning violation. So this is just another area of collaboration I think that we will continue to work on in the future.
Do all of our land use permits that have to do with campgrounds contain language that requires compliance with the health code?
I presume not, because they were all approved prior to December of 2019. I know there was a recent lawsuit that we entered a stipulation on, a smaller campground, but we put right in there in the stipulation that they have to comply with ATCP 79.
We might have had some general language that didn't, that simply said other permits, and it might have mentioned the county health code or in a generic or more generalized sense. That isn't the same thing. One could wish for something more precise, but perhaps it's enough.
And I think Lori mentioned that they also have a DNR contract, because there also is a campground administrative code in our 45, a portion of NR 45 that applies to camping, so DNR. So
and our
we don't have that in our statute, in our ordinance, so that probably should be added.
But the language of many old, several old campground permits from this board contain reference to a DNR requirements.
Perhaps they do. I'd have to pull them out and look to see.
Okay.
There aren't that many campgrounds.
No,
There are 13. but
only 13.
Those are public, private, and municipal. So there's all of those. They regulate.
That's not working? Oh. Thought it was working. They regulate, they inspect, public health does, whether they're in cities, villages, county-owned. I don't believe you do the Willow River State Park.
Yes, we do.
Oh, you do, okay, so the state inspects itself, got it.
The only campground that, we don't inspect are federally owned campgrounds.
Okay,
So you inspect the Glen Park, Glen Hills Park?
Yep.
As well?
they do every year, and they're out there, and we follow all the rules.
What, the county inspects itself?
Yes, and the county they're, on behalf of the state, they're inspecting the state. I thought maybe Willow River was exempt, because I've been told by the Willow River Park Administrator, they're exempt from all zoning regulation, which they are.
Oh,
So,
But
yeah.
we license and inspect the campground at Willow River.
So, not to belabor it, but at the same time, we do try, I mean, we are in contact with them regularly, but it hasn't had probably a lot to do with COVID, because I do remember very specifically being asked, who's our contact person, and signing Mike up when the week he started, which also was the week that COVID broke out. So it coincided, unfortunately. But we have talked about this before, but we need to really get it back on track, because there is a gap, and the gap has really caused us a lot of issues. So.
Well, you've got staffing shortage problems also, of
Sure.
course, but compliance is pretty important. It doesn't fall under the jurisdiction of this board, but,
No.
yeah.
Yeah, it just, you know, for enforcement, anything that we can understand better about what you can do, if you guys can issue any kind of enforcement action versus just, I understand we always try to start with coordination and collaboration and willing agreement, but there's a lot of issues out there where we don't get that, and so then it becomes an enforcement action, and I just need to, maybe we need to understand what, if anything, you can do for enforcement.
And Corp Counsel Amos could talk more about this. I do believe in certain instances, you know, the health department does have authority to write tickets. We talked about this actually during COVID, and getting a ticket book or something. And I think historically, St. Croix County has just not been a enforcer of, or, you know, wanting to, we, like you say, we want compliance. We want least restrictive means possible rather than ticketing. But certainly in some cases, I think across the unit, maybe we need to take a little closer look, so.
Yes, and so the ordinances do allow some type of enforcement mechanism. I can tell you that just in the last couple of years, we filed a lawsuit on a tourist rooming house in conjunction with the city of Hudson. You know, so the tourist rooming house was regulated by public health. We skipped the citation process and went right to lawsuit because we knew it wasn't going to be resolved with short of a lawsuit. So there are some enforcement mechanisms. I've always recommended to public health to write the letter first to see if they're willingly able or going to participate with compliance. So this last incident we had where public health then learned that the individual had more than 100 campsites, they worked with him right away and got the license updated. And so I think that's first, we always try to work with the applicants and get compliance, but if not, then yes, we would look at whatever enforcement mechanism is possible. So writing a citation or filing a lawsuit or, you know, getting an injunction if they're doing something they're not supposed to do. So again, we're short-staffed too, but we will always look for those enforcement mechanisms if we need to.
Maybe you could save some duplication of effort and divide up the campsites between your staffs for the internet review, so that somebody is doing that, you know, 3 weeks before each major weekend. The zoning staff could look at 7 of those campsites, and health staff could do the internet research on the other ones, and then inform the other what you find.
Mr. Chair, I would just add to that that the squeaky wheel tends to get the attention. So properties that we've had complaints about, you know, and sometimes those complaints have not been necessarily to do with the camping, but some other aspect. We've had about vegetation removal and or the entertainment activities. But that said, we also have to keep tabs on these older operations that were approved years ago, because they morph and change. And that's a challenge for both zoning and for public health in terms of the licensing review. When we permit either new facilities or have to re-permit campgrounds, and we're dealing with a couple properties where we're working with the operators on that. That's when it's especially important to coordinate, because there's overlap with, as Corporation Council just indicated, we've incorporated the state standards into our zoning requirements, and so we're looking at a lot of the same things. And we should make sure that both agencies are happy with what's being proposed. So that's the caution. In the roughly 3.5 years I've worked for the county, I've probably spent more time on campgrounds than anything else. If that's any indication of it's a disproportionate amount of time and effort because of some of the fanfare and controversy that has come with these operations. And it's great that people have the opportunity to camp and enjoy our beautiful environment and outdoor recreation, but they got to meet the rules.
I had no idea it was taking that much time.
I'll just say one more thing about, like, when you talked about if we find a facility that's been operating without a license, or in the wrong license category, when we go out and inspect it, just because they've been operating the way they are doesn't mean that when we review it, we don't apply, they still need to meet the code requirements. You know, we don't say, oh, you've been operating wrong, we'll still give you a license. We review what they have and make sure that it complies with the code.
Can I ask? Do you, since you've mentioned that they have to have a camper registration system and that they're electronic, do you request a copy of that at the end of each year?
No, we just verify that they have a registration system.
Wouldn't-
and that they're collecting those pieces of information.
If you requested it, wouldn't that show then if they were, probably very quickly, if you looked at their total numbers and things like that, if they've been exceeding their numbers, wouldn't that be even easier than internet checking to check up on them? To
You
check?
mean for special events?
No, I mean for just ongoing licensed camping, that they have, you license them for 200 and they have 500.
Right. I suppose that would be a more, I mean, to me, the simplest way is to look at their campground map, that however it is that they're advertising, and their electronic system where people can register for a site. I think that's also a good way to verify the number of sites. But you're correct, like if they pulled a report and it showed that on their electronic registration system, let's say they have, I don't know, 150 sites that they're, quote, renting out to, and we know that we have only 50 sites there. I'm not aware that our inspectors have used that registration system in that way to determine the number of sites.
I would think it would also be good, because some of that, what we have heard as complaints or related things is there's a limit to how many people can be at the campground sites, and that those are being exceeded, and that other things are being exceeded, that we've had complaints about it being dangerous because they're blocking roadways, things like that. We've had complaints that they're all too close together, that you can't safely get between them, that people get hit by, not hurt, but that there's problems with vehicles trying to get in and out because the campsites are just crammed together and they get landlocked, especially at the special event ones. We get a lot of complaints. We forward some of them to you guys, but I don't know if people make that second phone call. You know, a lot of people, if they didn't get help, they get angry and they just get angry. So But I would think it would be not a bad idea to start to say, yep, and I'll take a copy of that every year and just store it. Flash drive, something. And if I was an operator and I knew that you were collecting some kind of data annually, I might watch what I was doing a little closer, that kind of thing. Just a suggestion.
Sounds like, I don't know what to say about that. We will not tell you how to run your department, of course. And what you don't consider feasible is within your domain. I'm sure I speak for the board in thanking you for taking time out of your obviously busy schedule to come and give us this background that you did. We all learned something. And hopefully we'll make better land use decisions because of what we know about what you're doing.
Yeah, and if you ever have any other questions on the other license types that we do, because I noticed being here today, you guys, we cross-intersect with, you know, some of the cases that were before today are properties that we also issue licenses on. So communication is always good. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah. Anything else, board members? No? Yep, that's it. Thank you. So what do we got to do to get out of here?
I nominate Buck Malik as chairman.
Second.
Neither of you have your microphones on.
I move the nominations be closed.
Jeez.
Teachers come late.
Are you also calling for the vote?
Sure, we'll call a vote. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, say
Aye.
nay. Nay.
Nay.
Say-
Motion carries.
Yeah.
Thank you, I think. Nominations are open for vice chair then.
I nominate Joe Miller for vice chair.
Joe Miller has been nominated. Are there any
Second.
other? No.
I move nominations be closed.
Is there a second to the motion to close nominations?
Second.
Mr. Peterson seconds the motion to close the nominations. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimously.
You and me, Buck, all the way.
Damn. Anything to say about the next meeting? I'm going to be absent. I'm going to be out of town. So.
I'm going to be out of town as well.
I'll be handling the presentations.
We do have several items for the agenda.
Any reason to think of 2 days?
I-
Not that bad, huh?
I don't think so.
Okay. You got any news for us, Julie?
What's that about the river thing? I didn't see anything on it. I missed something.
It's over by Mike. There are 2 workshop on the water opportunities for you. Let me know if you'd like to register for either the upper or the lower St. Croix trip, and I will register you and pay for you. Mike has it in his hand. I can also send it to you via email if you'd like, and then you can look at the dates and compare with your calendars, and
we can
then
look at
just
our
respond
calendars.
and let me know, and I can get you registered and paid, and that the department pays for you to go, if you'd like to go to one or both, and a dinner is included. They are always very, very good educational workshops. And then I think you all have a copy of the grand opening on June 3rd. Please attend if you are
Everybody's got
able.
this?
Come see our brand-new
See
campground
there
that is fully licensed. And
The license is current, huh?
it is current. Our dump station is amazing.
Not exceeded.
So please
The
come
heads have
visit.
been pumped.
I will, let it go at those two events.
Anything else for the good of the order? Okay, it's, oops, yes, Ms. Dungy.
For a future agenda item, we apologize, but Heather and I were not able to get together in time to do the bylaw change. So do you want it on next month's agenda, or would you rather wait till you're able to be there, Buck, at the following one?
I'm okay for waiting till August.
It would be July, because the next one will be June. This is May.
Oh, well, this is May?
So the
Oh,
July agenda, would that, what you prefer, or what would you guys prefer?
Well, if you could get it to me,
Ahead of
I
time?
could possibly comment on, I'm just worried that we're gonna have another revocation come up and we don't have any process in place to deal with it. I don't
Right.
know, can you assure me there are gonna be no more,
We would just wait until the rules are updated. That would be my
The staff would
recommendation.
say, oh, we don't really want to revocate this month. We'll wait till next
We'll
month.
wait till next month. I'm only asking because
Anyway.
I'm an attorney down right now, but I think we could, Ellen and I are meeting, so we could probably get
Yeah.
it done in the next couple weeks.
I offered to buy. She hasn't taken me up on it yet, so.
oh. take
Just to
her
get
up
it
on
done.
Take her up on it.
Yeah.
Why don't you tentatively put it on the June agenda?
Okay.
And if you get something to me in time, I'll try to have my comments there. And chances are we'll have to talk about it more than once.
That'd be great.
Right? That'll-
Yeah, that's fine.
I shouldn't do that to you,
I
Joe.
can postpone it just as easy, you know?
Good man.
Yeah, we will try again, and we will get you it if we possibly can. We still think it's going to be fairly short.
Yeah. Okay.
All right.
I believe
Thank you.
that sets us up for adjournment then. Thank you, everybody, for bearing with it.
Really good conference.